Hi guys, so in a previous episode of Taking Back Friday, I showed the finished arboreal sweater that I knitted, and it has that two-color colorwork yoke. And in that episode, I talked a lot about how I like to use two hands to do my colorwork knitting. And Athena left a comment about asking to see how I do my two-color knitting and holding the yarn in both hands. And so that's what I'm going to show you guys next. Okay, so there are 60 stitches on my circular needle. When I start knitting sort of a magic loop technique, what I do is I pull some of the needle through half of this cast on. So halfway down this cast on, I'm going to pull my needle cord through. Okay, so it's helping to take up some of the slack there. So you can see that's my cast on, okay? And what I want to do is I'm going to fold these two together so that way they're still oriented correctly, and I'm going to keep pulling this needle through, taking up all that slack until the needle tip starts to come forward. I'm going to push all those stitches onto that needle tip. So you can see I have my cast on, and they have been divided onto two of those needle tips. So now I'm going to keep them from getting tangled. I'm going to orient this. This is going to be the inside. This is going to be the inside of my knitting. This is going to be the outside. Okay. So I'm going to pull this needle tip out. Pull that one forward, okay, and keeping, okay, pull that needle forward so that I can use that needle tip to knit here, okay. So as I start making these stitches, I'm going to tighten up that first stitch so that it closes the two ends and makes my join. So I'm just going to knit across, knit around. Okay, when I get to the end of those stitches and there's no more stitches left on that needle, what I need to do is I need to move those stitches onto this needle tip so I can continue knitting them. So I'm going to adjust the cable. Push those needle stitches back, push those stitches back onto the needle. And then with this needle tip, I'm going to pull these ones out again so I have something to work with. So halfway through, you can see my needles look kind of like this in terms of an orientation. I have this small circumference going on here, okay? And at the same time, all of the excess of this circular needle is being taken up here and here. And then as I get to the end of this, I'm just going to adjust my needles again and then keep knitting. Okay, I have again reached the end. When I reach the end of the round, I'm going to take this cord and then pull the excess here so that the needle tip goes back onto those stitches so I can knit those. And then this needle, I'm going to pull this one out. And then I can keep knitting like so. So that is basically how I knit magic loop for everything. So you need to make sure that if you're going to do magic loop, you need to have a circular needle that is long enough, that has a cord long enough that you can move around. Because it needs to have enough slack in order to have loops at both ends of your knitting and to be able to knit comfortably. So this is putting the stitches back onto the first needle and then taking this needle tip out, sliding that out, and then you can keep knitting. So here I'm going to show you how I do my 2-color knitting. And so basically what I have here is I have the chart that I'm going to use. This is the Zweig chart that I'm going to use. And basically we're going to pretend that this white color, this C2 color, is actually this purple color, and that this black motif here is actually going to be my second color. This is my Magician. This is a fingering weight yarn. I'm going to use it doubled like I did with my arboreal sweater. So this first row is just to basically knit around using that second color. So I'm going to join on my second color and do that. So you can see that this yarn, it was wound into a center pull ball. I have one yarn coming from the inside and one yarn coming from the outside, and I hold those 2 strands together and pretend that they're one. So we're going to knit around with that light color. So that's finishing round 1 with the contrasting color. So now to start the actual pattern, she wants to do 5 stitches of this contrast color, 1 stitch of the previous color. So what I do is I will take my lighter color and put that, this is my contrast color, I'm going to put that on the left side. And then my main color is this darker purple, I'm going to put on this side, on my right hand side. And so I'm going to hold these 2 yarns in different hands. So this is the main color I'm going to hold in this hand. And then this one I'm going to hold in this hand. Okay, so this first stitch is a little bit loose because it's the starting stitch, but I use my left hand to pick. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then I have to do 1 stitch in this color. So then I knit like so. So again, I'm going to knit 1, 2, 3, 3, 4, 5. I spread out these stitches along this right hand needle to make sure that the float is not too tight, and then I do another stitch. So you can hopefully see that this yarn being held in the left hand is being held underneath, and this yarn, when I'm going to make the stitch, is laying over top of that contrasting color. So I'm laying over top here, okay, to make that 1 stitch. And then when I go to make the next stitch, you can see that this yarn is basically coming from underneath. So they kind of have their lanes. So the main color always stays in its lane and the contrast color always stays on its lane. Spreading these out to make a nice float, like so. Okay, so that's 5 stitches, and now I have to adjust for my magic loop. Okay, so again, holding this yarn in this hand, this yarn in this hand. And so I have to make sure that this float is nice and long. And then continuing. like so. So you can see 5 stitches of the contrasting color. This is the main color and a nice big long loose float at the back here. Okay, so we are on to the next round of the chart, and so basically it's going to be 3 stitches of the dark color and 3 stitches of the light color, but they are centered. So I need to do 1 stitch of this darker color first, and then 3 stitches of this color, and then 1 stitch here, 2, 3. And again, always spreading out my stitches on the right hand needle so that the floats are loose. So you can see I'm coming to do the next contrast stitch and the yarn is coming from underneath. So this yarn always seems to go over top. This yarn is always underneath. They have their separate lanes and they stay in their separate lanes. And this yarn is coming over top those stitches. Okay, so that's it. That's a little mini 2-in-1 tutorial. It's a little bit of magic loop and it's a little bit of 2-color colorwork knitting. And this is the tiny little swatch that we made. And so you can see the main color is this darker mulberry purple color. And then the little motif is the magician, where I held the Cash Luck Spark doubled. So it's a fingering weight yarn that's been held double to make the approximate same weight as a sort of a DK weight yarn. So you can see tiny little swatch here with those tiny little motifs. And that's how I do it. So I knit everything in a small circumference. I knit everything with magic loop, socks, sleeves, everything. It's a little bit more finicky for small numbers of stitches. You know, you have to constantly be adjusting and moving these needles around, but I actually prefer it to using double pointed needles because I always find that I'm constantly, the stitches are falling off of the end of those double point needles. So I like having the security of having all the needles on one circular at one time. So, you know, if I'm going to stop my project for just a second, I basically just pull the needles through, and then, you know, you can tuck them all the way to the end of the needle. They're on the circular part of the cord. They're not going to go anywhere. You're not going to lose those stitches, and you can, you know, try on sleeves and things like that. So that's how I do everything. And then that 2-color knitting using both hands, it's really handy. It's really easy, and it just feels like it goes faster. And I like the consistency of making sure that those yarns stay in their lanes. You know, the contrasting color stays on the bottom lane and the top lane is taken up by the main color. And so making sure that those yarns stay aligned in that area makes your floats in the back really tidy. It makes a really clean appearance in the back. And it also really ensures that your stitches are consistent and that they're always evenly spaced and sized. If you're interested in this specific technique, this specific information, you want to look up some stuff about color dominance when working with Fair Isle. Basically, the color that you hold in your left hand or your right hand, those colors are going to, some of them are going to pop forward a little bit and some of them are going to recede a little bit. So there's been a lot of things written about this before, and we can go into depth about this particular topic in a longer episode or something like that. But basically, which color you hold in which hands, it actually makes a difference, because some colors will look a little bit bigger, stronger, and then other colors will look a little bit more faded back into the background. So that's something we can definitely explore in a longer episode. So yeah, that's it for this week, and I hope that you found this useful. And let me know how you knit your 2-color or Fair Isle colorwork knitting. Do you hold them both in one hand? Do you hold them in 2 different hands? How do you do your 2-color colorwork knitting? All right, thanks. I guess I will see you guys in the next one. All right, bye for now.